Space Podcast.
I put my phone down, sighing heavily. I had just been speaking to my father, Spence. He told me he wasn't going to make it to Stephanie's for Sunday lunch tomorrow. He sounded tired, worn. But then again, he always sounded like that, and I couldn't blame him. I felt the same exhaustion myself. We had carried it with us for years. The memories we held, the nightmares we had survived. He told me Mom wanted to go away, maybe to the mountains for a while. She wasn't doing well these days either. It seemed like every week she was trying a new medication. The nights were the worst. My father had quietly admitted this to me. The tossing and turning, the fearful glances at the door, jumping at every sound. For my father and I, the passage of time wasn't enough to erase the fear that was seared into our minds like a brand. Stephanie seemed to be doing the best out of the four of us. She was happily married, and her baby twins were almost 3 months old now. She had named them Jack and Jill. She thought it was cute, and it was. Her husband Louis was a good guy. He took care of them, a selfless, strong man who put his children and wife before all. I sat in the darkness of my apartment glancing at the clock. It was almost 11. I thought about retiring for the night, but instead got up and poured myself a shot of rum. I downed it without even thinking and let the heat settle my worn mind. I got up to take a piss and heard my phone ringing from where I had left it on the couch. I zipped up my pants and went to pick it up. I expected it to be my father again. It was Stephanie. Why is she calling me this late? I thought to myself, immediately going into full alert. I placed the cell to my ear. Hello? Steph? It was silent for a few moments, something rubbing against the speaker. Then my sister's voice trickled through the line, terrified and thin. Matt? My brow furrowed. Yeah, I'm here. Is everything okay? More heavy breathing, and then a thick whisper. Matt, he's here. The line went dead. My heart began to race, fear suddenly roaring in the silence. I stood in the darkness, phone pressed to my head, eyes growing wide. No, Jesus Christ, please, no, not yet. I immediately redialed Stephanie, but it went to voicemail. As I placed the phone down on the counter, I realized my hands were shaking. I poured myself another shot and threw it back. I began to pace, trembling in the dark, mind spinning. It was everything I had ever feared, but it was too soon. Way too soon. Fuck! I screamed, throwing my glass against the wall, hysteria splintering my throat. Fuck! 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 I collapsed on the couch and tried to call Stephanie again. It rang once, twice, then it picked up. Steph? Steph, tell me exactly what's going on. Are you okay? There was no response, but I could hear something in the background, muffled and urgent. Tears were forming in my eyes. Jesus, Steph, please tell me you're okay. Then a voice like cold silk. Hello, Matt. Oh, it has been some time, hasn't it? Recognition blasted through me like an icy wind, swirling through the depths of my mind and ripping apart every horror I had ever experienced. Bile lurched in my stomach, and sweat broke out across my forehead. Voice trembling, I asked in a whisper. Tommy? The line went dead again. I stood up, clawing at my hair, vomit threatening my throat. No, this wasn't happening. Please, God, fuck! 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 I couldn't stop shaking. The voice on the phone opening up years of suppressed nightmares, tearing the chains and shattering the locks. I collapsed on my knees and vomited onto the floor, unable to hold it back any longer. I stared at nothing, bloodshot eyes blinking rapidly. 5 more years. No! I screamed, pounding the floor with a fist. I got to my feet and snatched my keys from the countertop. Stephanie only lived a couple minutes away. I was not going to let this happen. Not again. I slammed the car into park, panting. Stephanie's house was lit up like a distress beacon, but the drapes were drawn across the front windows. I couldn't see any signs of movement, no shadows, nothing. I wrung my hands, racking my brain. What exactly was I going to do? What was my plan here? I just knew I had to do something. I wasn't going to let my sister's family suffer like ours had. And what about Lewis? He would have no idea what was going on. He would fight back. Oh no. Taking a deep breath, I opened my car door, the cool night air hitting my face like a splash of water. My sister's street was dark, the quaint line of single-story houses lining the road like blacked-out bricks. Except for Stephanie's. Rubbing my hands on my pant legs, I approached the front door, heart hammering in my chest like a wild drum. My throat was dry, and a voice in my head screamed to just go back home. But I couldn't. Not until I knew Stephanie and her family were okay. Maybe I could... Fuck. Maybe I could what? I was standing before the front door. I ran a hand across my forehead and then knocked. I pressed my ear to the door, but couldn't hear anything through the thick wood. As I raised my fist to knock again, the lights in the house went out. I pounded on the door now, terror and urgency detonating in my chest like a bomb. Stephanie, it's me, Matt. Please open the door if you can. Suddenly, I heard the deadbolt turn. I stepped back as the door cracked open, breath rushing from my lungs like a discarded balloon. 2 blue eyes shined from the darkness, glowing like crystals of fire. And then a voice, smooth as cream. A little late for a visit, don't you think, Matt? Staring into those burning blue eyes, hearing my name from his foul lips, it took everything I had to keep standing. Where's Stephanie and the babies? Where's Lewis? I finally choked out, frozen on the front steps, unable to look away from his eyes gazing at me from the black. We're all here. Just getting reacquainted. Lewis wasn't very welcoming. What have you done? I hissed. Suddenly, the lights in the house went on and the eyes in the door melted into a face and head and body. A shockwave of horrific memory rocketed through me, almost sending me to my knees. Tommy Taffy looked exactly how I had remembered him from all those years ago. His short blonde hair, the small nub jutting from his face where his nose should have been, that eerie strip of seamless white where his teeth should have been, and his ever-glowing blue eyes. So intense they threatened to drown me. His perfect, impossibly flawless skin gleamed in the light, reminding me of soft plastic. Tommy pulled the door open, gesturing inside with his hand. You came to see your sister, didn't you? From my place on the steps, I could see directly into the kitchen. Lewis was slumped on the floor, motionless by the table. Stephanie was next to him, weeping, clutching at his still body. She looked towards the door and saw me, her eyes widening, desperation shaking her voice. Matt, help us, please. The agony stretched across her face tore me apart. Tears blooming in my own eyes, I went to push past Tommy, but he grabbed my shoulder, stopping me. You saw your sister. No need to get involved, Tommy said, his grip like an iron clamp digging into my collarbone. I turned to Tommy, 1 foot in the house. Please, leave them alone. Haven't you taken enough from our family? It's time for you to go, Matt, Tommy said, pushing me back outside. Stephanie wailed, screaming my name from her place beside Lewis. I tried to step around Tommy, desperation raking my voice. Please, just let... I was cut off as Tommy suddenly stepped forward and grabbed me by the throat. He slammed me against the side of the house, never releasing his grip. His face was inches from mine, his voice like burning coals, but his face remained calm. I told you to go. Don't make it worse for them. This isn't about you anymore. I gasped as he released me, slumping to my knees in the dewy grass. I watched helpless as Tommy went back inside and slammed the front door. The lights in the house went out, and then the screams began. I sat in my dark apartment, the bottle of rum beside me almost as empty as my gaze. The sun was rising, a soft pink glow tickling the horizon through the window. I hadn't slept, my imagination running rampant. I couldn't let Stephanie live through this. Not again. Not for another 5 years. Time had hidden the abominations of our childhood from my sister. Tommy entering our lives at an age she could still forget. The twins. He had come back for the twins, Jack and Jill, to continue his reign of terror through the generations of our family. When would it end? How could it end? The hours offered no solution, the rum burning in my gut giving no comfort. Suddenly, my cell rang, startling me. I blinked and realized the sun now was burning cheerily through the window. How long had I been sitting here? My heart jumped as I saw it was Stephanie calling me. I hurriedly answered. Hello, Steph? Are you okay? What has he done? My sister's voice was emotionless and flat. Tommy said it was okay for you to come over for lunch, just like we planned. What did he do to you? I hissed. Her voice never changed. He's feeding the twins. Everything is okay. Steph, I started, but she hung up. I rose and rushed to the bathroom, splashing water over my face. The rum seemed to have no effect on me, my eyes meeting my face in the mirror with surprising clarity. But that did nothing to dilute the fear that plagued my mind. I raced out of my apartment and into my car, and as I drove, I found myself becoming sick. Claws dug into my memory and uprooted the past horrors I had experienced at the hands of Tommy. I couldn't let Jack and Jill go through that. I couldn't let Stephanie watch her family slowly get torn apart. A couple minutes later, and I was parking in front of her house. I anxiously got out of the car and went to the front door where I knocked. Tommy answered, a baby in each arm. Hello, Matt. Glad to see you at a more appropriate hour. Come on in. Just seeing him touch the children made my skin crawl and my stomach clench, but I shut my mouth and said nothing. I walked past him and he kicked the door shut behind me, bouncing the babies in his arms and beaming down at them. Beautiful children, aren't they? Tommy said softly, staring down into their faces. Where's my sister? I asked, a trickle of sweat running down my spine like a ghost. As if to answer, Stephanie came walking down the stairs. Her skin was pale, and dark bags hung from her eyes. There was no sign of physical violence, but I knew that Tommy had other ways to punish people. Lunch is ready, she said tonelessly, her eyes dead. She walked into the kitchen and began setting food on the table. I followed her and then froze. Lewis was slumped over the table, breathing heavily. One side of his face was swollen, closing his left eye. Blood leaked from his mouth onto the empty dinner plate before him. His legs had been broken, his shins and ankles twisting along the sides of the chair at angles that turned my stomach. Upon seeing me, he raised his head, trailing drool and blood from the corners of his mouth. Get this monster out of my house, he whispered to me. Before I had any chance to respond, Tommy was sweeping in behind me, cooing down at the babies. Stephanie was like a zombie, placing the steaming platters of food before us and then sitting in the chair opposite her bleeding husband. "Jesus, Lewis," I gasped. "We need to get you some help. Come on, I'm taking you to the hospital." Tommy looked up at me from the babies. "Matt, sit down and enjoy the food your sister so lovingly made for you. It would be terribly wasteful to ignore such a feast." As if to lead by example, Tommy took a place at the table, the gurgling, oblivious twins chirping in his arms. "He needs help, Tommy," I insisted, terrified of the words coming out of my mouth. "Don't be dramatic, Matt." I suddenly slammed my hand down on the table. "I'm taking him to the hospital, goddammit!" Immediately, I regretted my sudden aggression. The gasoline fire in my chest was doused instantly as Tommy's shining blue eyes met mine. Wordlessly, Tommy stood and handed Jill to Stephanie, who gratefully accepted her daughter. Eyes never leaving me, Tommy took Jack and went to the sink. He turned on the garbage disposal. Horror ripped through my brain like a blazing locomotive. The loud whirring of the blades filled the kitchen and choked the fight from me, replacing it with furious caution. "Get away from there!" Lewis screamed, struggling to stand, but screaming as his broken bones squirmed against his twisted flesh. Tommy lowered the now crying Jack towards the black mouth of the garbage disposal, his eyes never leaving me. "It would be a tight squeeze, but I think I could get him to fit," Tommy said, his voice like the edge of a knife. I raised a trembling hand. "Stop, okay, please, just stop." But Tommy kept lowering the baby, its howling face now inches from the opening. "I only need one, Matt. Maybe you need a lesson. Maybe you've forgotten how this works." Stephanie was clutching Jill, her eyes bulging from her face, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. No, I'll do whatever you want, please. Just stop, please." I got down on my knees, voice shaking, my own tears of terror pouring from my eyes. "Just don't hurt the baby. Don't hurt Jack." Tommy's eyes bore into my skull, examining my words like they were under a microscope. Finally, he turned off the garbage disposal, handing Jack to Stephanie. I let out a shuddered sigh of relief and shakily got to my feet. Tommy took a seat at the table and pointed for me to do the same. I didn't hesitate. "You godless fuck," Lewis growled, clenching his fists. "I'm gonna kill you. I'm going to fucking kill you." Tommy turned to him and I saw his jaw clench. "Don't push me, Lewis. It won't end well." "Fuck you," Lewis spat. Like lightning, Tommy stood and stepped towards Lewis, sliding his hand into the beaten man's mouth to grip his upper jaw. Without slowing, Tommy heaved Lewis out of his chair and threw him face first into the refrigerator. With a dull thud, Lewis's face erupted in a fountain of blood and shattered teeth as it collided with the hard surface. He slid to the floor, leaving bloody trails in his wake. Face like smooth stone, Tommy lifted him by the hair and dragged him to the oven. He pulled the door down and shoved Lewis's head into the crack. And without hesitating, Tommy began to smash his skull between the oven and the door, each blow crunching into his head and splitting the skin. "Stop it, Tommy! Stop, you're gonna kill him!" I screamed, leaping across the table. Tommy spun and pointed at the twins, his eyes locked with mine, his voice thundering across the kitchen like a summer storm. "It's him or the baby? Who's it gonna be?" I collapsed in my chair, eyes wide, entire body shaking. Tears poured from my eyes, my lips twisting and quivering to form words, but only helpless sobs escaped. The twins were howling, and Stephanie clutched them to her chest, weeping, shock washing over her in horrified waves. I turned away, world rocking, ears filling with screaming and crying as Tommy crushed Lewis's head with the oven door. Spittle flew from my lips with each ragged breath I sucked into my lungs, reality bending and darkening. Tommy straightened, panting, observing his work. Blood splatter painted the cabinets and floor, slow trails that oozed like reaching fingers. Stephanie was weeping, eyes squeezed shut, twins mimicking their mother's sorrow. Tommy ran a hand through his hair, exhaling, his eyes meeting mine. He smiled, shaking his head like he couldn't believe it. He then turned to Stephanie and motioned for the babies. "Give them to me. Clean your husband's mess up." My nails were digging into the tabletop, knuckles white. I couldn't believe the carnage I had just witnessed, the brutal execution of my brother-in-law. I was shaken to the core, my vision spinning in disbelief. Tommy leaned down and snatched the babies from my sister. "Go. Put him in the basement for now." "Why did you have to do that?" Stephanie squeaked between sobs. Tommy began to soothe the twins, shooting a look at my sister. "He wasn't right for this family. Now clean him up." Tommy walked into the living room, motioning for me to follow him. My chair scraped loudly against the floor as I stood, watching my mentally shattered sister begin to drag her husband towards the basement door. Drool leaked from her lips as she whispered loving apologies to the deceased. She was breaking. In a horrific daze, I followed Tommy into the living room, feeling like I was in a dream. I wanted to murder this monster, rip this cancer from my family. But another part of me knew I couldn't, that attempting to do so would just bring more violence. There just had to be a way, though. Tommy had settled the twins and was now watching me. "You okay, Matt?" I said nothing, my shell-shocked eyes staring into nothing. And Tommy nodded. "I know this is probably upsetting. That's why I wanted to talk to you in private. I'm worried about your sister and how she's going to take all this. I'm worried about how it will affect her parenting." My eyes rose to meet his, my voice incredulous. "You did this." Tommy ignored my accusation. "Matt, I'd like you to stay here with us for a while. Keep an eye on your sister. Help her through this. I'm afraid it's the only chance we have of settling her mind after such tragedy." My fists were clenched by my sides. "One day, someone is going to stop you." Tommy smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Careful, Matt." "Just leave my sister alone. Get out of her life," I said through gritted teeth. "I can't do that," Tommy insisted. "Not with such beautiful children to be raised. In fact, that's the reason I'm here so early. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to see them." His eyes glowed, twin spotlights cutting into the darkness of my mind. I took a step towards him, whispering, "What the fuck are you?" "Heh, heh, 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 heh." I stayed with Stephanie that night. It had taken her almost 3 hours to clean up Lewis, and when she was finished, she went up to her bedroom and collapsed. I put the babies to bed after giving them a bottle and stood on the balcony, staring down into the empty living room. Everything felt wrong, like I was dreaming. The shocking events that were slowly twisting my life dug into my brain, unearthing every horror I had spent years burying. A hand rested on my shoulder. I turned to see Tommy, the light in my sister's bedroom glowing behind him. "Go. Be with her tonight. It's important she feels the warmth of a man beside her. It will help ease her husband's passing." I said nothing, just stared into Tommy's smooth face. Every ounce of me screamed to plunge my fingers into his eyes. Tommy pushed me towards Stephanie's bedroom. Go. Wordlessly, I walked down the hall and into my sister's bedroom. I shut the door behind me and went to sit on the bed. Stephanie was under the covers, staring at the ceiling through bloodshot eyes. Her skin was pale, and heavy bags dripped down her cheeks. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I laid down next to her and turned off the lamp. After a couple of hours, I blessedly heard the shallow breath of sleep beside me. Good, I thought. Let her mind have a few hours' peace. The deep hours of the night snuck up on me, but I barely even noticed. My mind refused to shut down, ideas and possible ways outcircling my exhausted head like water circling a drain. Something Tommy had said kept echoing in my mind. I only need one of them. I examined those words, wringing out every possible meaning and scenario they could represent. I didn't like what I found. I glanced at my sleeping sister next to me, her suffering apparent even in slumber. My heart screamed for her and I felt my eyes well up. She didn't deserve this. Not again. Not for another 5 years. I couldn't watch that. I couldn't let it happen. What was I willing to do to save her? What kind of person would I have to become? And how could I possibly live with myself if I did what the darkness whispered? You know how to save her, something chuckled from the black. Tommy made a mistake tonight. Or was it? Maybe he's testing you. Either way, you know you can't continue like this. You can't live knowing your dear sister is breaking. I covered my face in the dark, tears staining it. What kind of person would I be? At some point in the night, I became aware of something by the bedroom door. I turned my head and saw Tommy watching us through a crack in the door, his blue eyes illuminating the darkness to cast a soft glow across his smiling face. I shivered and turned away. It was hours before I felt his gaze leave me. I awoke to a scream. I bolted upright, sleep leaving me in an instant. I didn't remember falling asleep, but the dark gloom from the window told me it was late. I glanced at the clock on the bedside and saw it was almost 10. Rain threw itself against the house, a wind slamming angrily against the windows. Another scream shot me out of bed. It was Stephanie. I looked at the empty bed and my heart began to race. I sprinted out of the room into the hallway. Tommy was marching up the stairs, holding my sister by the hair. She was grasping at his wrists, tears running down her face in agony as he shook her, screaming down into her face. "When will you learn?" he howled, never slowing his pace. My heart crawled up my throat and sickness boiled in my stomach. "What happened?" "Tommy let go of her." Still dragging my sister, Tommy ascended to the top of the stairs. He reached out and palmed my face, throwing me hard against the wall. Stars exploded in my vision as my head bounced off the sheetrock, sending me to my knees. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't calling anyone, I promise." Stephanie howled as Tommy pulled her towards her bedroom. "The police can't help you? Matt can't help you. Only I can help you," Tommy snarled. He threw her across the room onto the bed and turned back to me. Fury stretched his face and burned in his eyes. "Your sister needs another lesson," he growled before slamming the door and locking it. I crawled to my feet, racing to the door. I jiggled the handle and pounded on the wood, screaming, begging. From inside, I heard something crash, and my sister's voice arched and rose, reaching an almost animalistic height of hysteria. "Tommy, stop it! Tommy, please, leave her alone!" I cried, slamming myself against the door. It didn't budge, and my sister continued to howl. I spun in the hallway, clawing at my hair, eyes wide. "Fuck! Fuck!" My heart motored in my chest and my whole body shook. a sense of maddening helplessness and anguish threatening to overwhelm me. "Stop this," my mind screamed. "You have to stop this." I pounded the wall, tears rolling down my face. "No, no, no, no! She still has a chance. She can recover from this plague. Do something before it's too late," my mind howled. Breath hitching in my throat, my sister's scream echoing and crashing into my skull, I turned to the twins' room. I squeezed my fists together, world blurring through tear-soaked eyes, and went in. Jack and Jill were sniffling in their cribs, staring up at me with confused, scared expressions. I looked down at them, sobbing, placing my forehead against Jill's crib. "No, no, no, no," I wept. "Please, please." I righted myself and reached down, stroking her soft cheek. Snot bubbled from my nose, face a wet mess of agony and mental devastation. "I am so sorry, little one," I whispered, Stephanie's shrieks collapsing my willpower. "But you can't understand the pain your mother is going through, what she'll have to endure. I love you and Jack with all of my heart, but I love my sister more." I picked up a pillow and placed it over the child's face. It took 48 seconds for Jill to die. Hoarse cries rattled my chest. Prayers of forgiveness poured from my lips. I went to Jack's crib and killed him. When it was over, I threw the pillow against the wall and slumped down to my knees, raining the floor with tears of horror at what I had just done. My mind cracked, ripping in two and bleeding sorrow and self-hatred through my body. Suddenly, something was roughly hauling me to my feet. I coughed as a hand gripped my throat and slammed me against the wall. I blinked and stared through grief-stricken eyes into Tommy's enraged face. "What have you done?" he bellowed, shaking. Through the misery, a deep, murderous hatred blazed in my chest like wildfire. I leaned into Tommy, voice like hot steel. "I'm freeing this family from your shadow." Screaming, I smashed my face into his as hard as I could. My vision blinked, the darkness quickly clearing under a storming rage. Tommy howled, stumbling backwards, clutching his face. Something yellow and thick dripped from his mouth. He looked down at it, eyes glowing wide. "I knew you could bleed," I snarled, wiping tears from my face. Tommy stared at his covered hand and then back up at me, fury reigniting. "What have you done to the children?" "I killed your lifeline," I hissed. Before he could respond, I charged him. I threw my body into his, slamming him against the wall with a heavy thud. The surprise and pain that rippled across his face fueled my sudden murderous hunger. I grabbed his hair and ripped his face to the side, burying my teeth into his soft throat. He screamed as my jaws snapped shut, my mouth filling with warmth and shredded flesh. I spat the mouthful out as Tommy shoved me back, hand going to his gushing throat. His fingers coated with the yellow liquid, pouring down his shirt and chest. I didn't let him recover. I grabbed a lamp and brought it crashing into his skull, bringing him to his knees. I drove a fist under his chin while simultaneously swinging the lamp again, driving the butt directly into his eyes. He howled, falling against the wall, reaching out, desperate. I knelt over him, tossing the lamp aside. My fists thudded into the gaping hole into his throat, summoning new howls of agony. It fueled me, ignited me, filled me with rage. I stood and kicked him onto his stomach. He started to crawl towards the door, but I brought a foot down into his spine, causing him to twist and shriek. Keeping my foot on his back, panting, I leaned down, voice like venom. "It's over, Tommy. You motherfucker." Even through the obvious pain, he twisted, his eyes burning with hatred and his voice hoarse. "You can't kill me. There are other families." I reached down and gripped beneath his chin with both hands. But not my family. I pulled back as hard as I could, muscles straining and screaming. Howling and thrashing, Tommy's neck bent backwards until the skin in his throat split with a sickening pop. I didn't stop, sweat pouring from my brow, fingers digging into his skin. And with a deafening crack, Tommy's spine broke at the base of his neck. And then he was still. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, muscles burning. I stared at the motionless body, fresh tears in my eyes. I had done it.
Why? Fucking Christ!
And then he was still. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, muscles burning. I stared at the motionless body, fresh tears in my eyes. I had done it. I had killed Tommy Taffy. A wave of relief and sorrow rolled through me like a rising tide, hot and cold crashing into each other as the consequences of my actions stabbed me with needle-thin blades. What have you done? I rushed Stephanie to the hospital, calling the police on the way. I told them an intruder had broken into the house and murdered Lewis and the children. I didn't wait for the questions. My main concern was getting my unconscious sister medical attention. That day, something in me broke, something I can never heal or replace. A dark shadow hovers over my soul, a deadly reminder of what I did to save my sister. Guilt and anguish, those are just words compared to how I feel. I don't know if I'll be able to live with myself much longer, but I know Stephanie will live, my dear sister. The news of her children's demise rocked her to the bone. I stayed with her through it all, those long nights in the hospital filled with overwhelming sadness and grief. I told her Tommy had killed them, and it's a lie I will take to the grave, whenever that may come. And even when the sorrow threatens to kill me, I know, deep down, that Tommy is forever gone from our lives. Because of me, because of what I did, our family will die free from the shadow of that monster, free from Tommy Taffy.